Hello. In this video, we're going to talk about point of care, or POC. Point of care is the program that we use to document our ADLs, our vital signs, whether they be intakes or outputs, and some restorative orders. The CNAs in your building will be responsible for the majority of your point of care charting. However, it is not limited to just the CNAs, as therapy and the nursing staff have access to this program as well. The first screen that you look at is a login screen. This will have a list of all users for your building listed alphabetically by their last name. Up here at the top of the page, we have a few different buttons that have groups of letters in them. These are filters, or they will allow you to go to this page for this certain letter. So let's say that my last name started with a P. I could simply click on this PQRS, and it would immediately take me to the P section of the login screen for the users. This comes in handy if it seems difficult or is difficult to manipulate the slide bar on the right hand side of your screen over here. So for today, my user is POC08. So all I'm going to do is select my name, and it brings me to this keypad. This right here is where you will enter your 4-digit PIN number to get access to point of care. For a CNA, your 4-digit PIN number should be the last 4 of your Social Security number. For nursing staff, you have the ability to pick whatever PIN number you want for your login. With this login screen, you have 5 chances to enter your PIN number correctly. After the 5th incorrect attempt to log in, point of care will lock you out of the system. It is a safety measure that they take. They will assume that it is a fraudulent attempt to get into your account, which is why it will shut it down. If you are locked out of your account, visit your management, and one of the super users at your building has the ability to unlock your account. To show you how that will look, let's say I'm going to put in an incorrect PIN number for this login right here. I'm going to click enter, and it tells me that it's an invalid PIN. So that was attempt number 1. Below there, we have the close button, so I would just click on that. For my practice login, it is just 1, 2, 3, 4. Once I do it correctly and click enter, it brings me to the units for my building. Now this is a training database that we're using right here, so it doesn't make a whole lot of sense if you're thinking about your building and the names of your units. Trust me that when you go into point of care, your layout right here will look exactly like your building is laid out. So your units will make sense with their names. So we have north, we have south, and we have west. Today I'm going to work on the south unit. Now all I have to do is select this unit to get access to it. Just know that from any kiosk in your building, you are not limited to the unit that kiosk is located on. So even if this kiosk that I'm working on was on the west unit, I could still document on a resident that resides on the south unit. In this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick south. And when I do that, it will give me a list of residents. Now notice every resident that is on this unit has a red border around them. We'll get to that in just one second. Up here at the top, right now it is currently sorting the residents by their last name. If I wanted to, I could switch this around and say sort them by their first name alphabetically, or I could sort them by their unit, room, and bed, which would put them in order of how they are on your unit. And lastly, I could pick required only, which would show me just the residents that have required questions I have not yet answered. For today, we are going to work on Mr. Nate Muterspaw. So what I'm going to do is just click on Nate, and it brings me to a select category screen. Now right here I have MDS, I have vitals, and I have tasks. We are going to go into all 3 of these. Before we do that, I want to give you a little rundown of what this on this screen and how everything on here works. Over here in the top right, I have a switch resident button. This comes in very handy, and I'm going to show you why a little bit later in this video. To the right of that, we have resident profile. If I select the resident profile, it takes me to this resident's profile. In here, I would be able to see any alerts that were added via the face sheet. I would also be able to see any allergies that this resident had. Below that, I would be able to see the profile approaches / orders. So any care plan approaches would be listed right here, and any profile orders would be listed below. I could click on the current care plan, and right now we see that the resident requires active range of motion. Gives me some information about that order right there. Approaches and start date. We also have ADL function, rehabilitation potential, and this list goes on as I scroll down. What this has the ability to do is to take the place of your CNA assignment sheets. To the right of that, I have ICD-9 diagnosis, which we do not use anymore. We have converted to the ICD-10 diagnosis. So by selecting that, it would list all diagnoses for this resident. On the left-hand side, this would be my resident's picture. Below that, my resident's medical record number, their primary language, and their code status would all be listed right there. To get out of here, I'm going to come down to the right-hand side and click on Menu. When I click on Menu, it takes me back to this page right here. Below those buttons, I have Update and Look Back, and we'll get to those in a few when they become a little more relevant. So right now, I'm just looking at my MDS, my vitals, and my tasks. Now notice each one of these three options has a red border around it. That is telling you that there is at least one required question that you have to answer for this resident. So as a CNA working on the floor, any question that is red, you must answer. We need all these answered by the end of your shift, and the nursing staff will run a report to make sure that all of these questions have in fact been answered. So let's take a look at the first one in line, MDS. So if I click on MDS, it brings me three more options. I have my ADLs, I have my bowel and bladder, and I have my restorative nursing. So at first, let's just select ADLs. When I click on ADLs, it now brings me 5 options. So I have bed mobility, transfer, eating, toilet use, and bathing. So we are going to now start signing off on these. So let me show you how to do so. So at bed mobility, if I click on that, it's asking me, how did the resident move in bed? So here's my question that is red. I'm simply going to click on it. And I have some options to choose. I have independent, supervision, limited assistance, extensive assistance, total dependence, activity did not occur, family or non-facility staff provided the care, or this final answer, which we will never choose, is not recorded. We can't get rid of this answer. Just know that you are never to pick this answer. If the activity did not occur and the resident did not get out of their bed for your entire shift, then we would still need to answer this question and we would just select activity did not occur. If you ever question what is the difference, let's say, between independent or supervision, each one of these answers has a question mark to the right of it, which kind of take the place of those little sheets that you have up in the building that might be right next to the kiosk. And on those sheets, a lot of times, a lot of buildings will put the definition of each one of these. So with this question mark, I can just click on it, and independent tells me that no help or staff oversight was needed. Okay. If I click on the question mark for supervision, it tells me that the resident did the activity but required oversight, encouragement, or cues to do the task. So there's the difference between the two. So let's say on this question that the resident required supervision. Once I answered that, it popped up a second question for me. What was the staff support provided for the bed mobility? So again, this is red. I need to answer it. I click on that. And you'll notice that I have multiple options to choose from here. 7, in fact. 6 if we get rid of the not recorded, which again, we're never going to pick. So the cool thing about Matrix is, or point of care, is that when you select supervision, it will remove the options that no longer make sense based on your first answer. So I couldn't say supervision and then come down here and say 2+ people. All right, that would be a contradiction. So it doesn't allow us to do that. So my only options to choose are no setup or physical help from the staff, or setup help only. Again, if I needed a definition, I could click on the question mark. And this says resident provided with materials or devices necessary to perform the task independently. This includes giving or holding out an item that the resident takes from the caregiver. So let's say that it was setup help only. Once I have selected those as my answer, I will click Save. Now notice that the red border is now gone from the bed mobility section. However, this does not mean that you are done charting about bed mobility for your shift. If the resident gets in and out of bed 3-4 different times during your shift, we need to talk about that every single time. It's very important that we do so because each time might be a little bit different and we need to get an accurate picture of the resident's bed mobility. To the right of that, we have transfer. So if I click on transfer, this is going to work the exact same way as the previous one. How did the resident transfer? By selecting on that, again, I have my same answers to choose from. So let's say that it was an extensive assistance. By doing that, it prompts the next question, staff support provided for transferring. I will click on that one as well. Now notice it did the opposite. It took away the other answers that I had available before, and now just leaves me with 1 person or a 2+. So if I say that it was a 2+ person physical assist, and the third question it's wanting to know is what appliances or assistive devices were used for transferring. So I will click on this question. And it wants to know what appliances, again, or assistive devices were used for transferring. Select all that apply. On this one, you can choose more than one answer. So Bedfast Dollar, most of the time, they use bed rails for mobility or the transfer. They were lifted manually, lifted mechanically. There was a transfer aid, none of the above. So out of these options right here, if you notice, gate belt is not spelled out for you in any one of these 6 right here. But if we look, I'm going to go to transfer aid and look at the question mark. Resident was transferred by the use of a slide board, trapeze, cane, walker, braces, gate belt, or other assistive devices. So here would be my gate belt. And if my resident also used bed rails for mobility, or they were lifted manually, I could also pick that as well. After I've selected my answers, I could come down and click OK. Now that I've answered all 3 of my questions, none of them are red any longer. I will click Save. And the red border is gone away from the transfer now. All of these work the exact same way. Again, just because the red border is gone does not mean that you do not chart on that if it happens again. So if we transfer the resident, yet again, 3 or 4 times during the shift, we need to talk about every single one of those transfers. Also, therapy, as I mentioned, has access to this program as well. Therapy might go into point of care and talk about a transfer, which if it had a red border before therapy got to it, therapy answered the question and this border went away, well now, you might think that you're done for the shift with talking about transfers, when in fact, therapy answered it the first time. You need to go in and talk about the other transfers that occurred. Next in line is eating. Click on eating. How did the resident eat? Again, here are our options. I will say independent. Once I answered independent, what was the staff support provided for eating? So no setup or physical help from the staff. Save. Toilet use. How did the resident use the toilet? Same options. So say they were a limited assist. What was the staff support? 1 person physical. Save it. Bathing. How did the resident bathe? Now for our residents, they all get some type of bath, whether it be a partial bed bath or a shower on their shower days, but they are always getting some type of bath. So on here, let's say that it was physical help and part of bathing. Again, what was the staff support? I'll say it's a 1 person. And what type of bath? So do they get a complete bed bath, a partial bed bath, a shower, a tub bath, or an other bath? So in this one, we'll say that it was a partial bed bath and save. Now I have answered all 5 of these for my resident. And again, if I needed to, I would come back in here and document on these things again if they occurred during my shift. To get out of this screen, I'm going to come down here to the bottom right and click back. Now my ADLs, the red border is gone. I'm left with bowel and bladder and restorative. So I'm going to go into bowel and bladder. And it wants to know what is the resident's level of control with the bladder function. So on this question, it is going to ask whether they were continent or incontinent. So what was their bladder function? Were they continent? Were they incontinent? Do they have a catheter or an ostomy? Or was there no urine output for my shift? It's very important that if there was no urine output during my shift, that I come in and answer this question and select no urine output. I don't want to disregard this question because it didn't happen, because then when we look back at our reports, at the documentation for this resident, it just comes up as a blank. So we don't know if it actually occurred and you did not chart it, or if there was no urine output. So it's important that you come into this system and you say when something did not happen, as well as when something did happen. So let's say that the resident was continent, and it also wants to know about their level of control with the bowel function. So again, we're going to answer this question with continent and save. Now, a couple hours has passed, and we need to talk about the resident again with their, let's say, their bladder. So if I came back in here and the resident was incontinent, I need to come back into this question, even though it's not red, click on it, and say that this time they were incontinent. They did not have a BM this second time, so I would not need to answer this question again. I will save that, and now I have answered that question. The other option over here to the right is restorative nursing. So in restorative, there are multiple options, and this will all be depending on your facility and what they choose to assign to you via the restorative nursing in the point of care program. So the only thing that it's asking me right here is the range of motion. So it's the only one that is red. So I know that I need to come in here and I need to answer this question. So by clicking on range of motion, it wants to know what are the number of minutes for active range of motion. I have a keypad, so I will type in, let's say, 15 minutes and save it. That was all I needed to do on that one. To get out of here, again, I'm going to come down to the bottom right. I'm going to click on back. Brings me back here. Now I can go to my update and my look back, and there's going to be actually some substance within these two functions. So if I go to my look back, it is going to show me every question that I just answered. If you notice, we're going to start at the left-hand side. This one was about the bed mobility. What shift documented it? What was the question? How did you answer it? Who answered it? What score that gives them, as far as the resident goes with their ADLs, and my look back period, in this case 24 hours. Some of them are 8 hours and some are 24. So I would be able to go back and look at what has happened in the past 24 hours for this resident via the look back button. Now notice down here on the bowel and bladder, some are continent, and notice those score out at 0, but my incontinent scored at a 3. That's why it's very, very important to talk about these things as they happen, and especially if there's a difference in what happens with the residents. I'm going to close that out. My update function, if I click that button, would show me all the answers that I put in and would allow me to either amend, which would mean to fix that order or answer, or my other option would be to mark invalid. If I answered this for the wrong resident, I could mark this as invalid and it would remove it from the resident's questions. So if I were to click amend, the thing that it's going to ask me is what was my reason for amending. So incorrect data or more data available. Let's say in this case it was incorrect data. Once I did that, it would open up these two bottom questions to where I could fix those. So right now it says supervision. If I clicked on that, I could change that to an extensive assist. And when I do that, it's going to highlight this third question now. What was my staff support? Once I have changed it, I would click save, and it has now fixed that answer for me in the system. Again, I access that by clicking the update button. All right, I've answered all of these in here that need it for right now. So to go back, I'm going to click on my menu, and I still have my vitals and my tasks. So I'm going to go ahead and look at tasks. And if I see it, I have AM cares that are currently lit up. PM cares are not. So these are time-based. And these are built in through Matrix that will then reflect in point of care for you. So our AM cares, we have a window that we are able to answer this question. So we got to make sure that we get in and answer this while it's still red. So AM care, if I click on it, there's my question. Is it done? Was it not done because the resident refused? Was it not done because the resident was unavailable? Not done because the resident was combative? Or not done, deferred due to condition? So in this case, it was done. I completed my AM cares for this resident. So I select done and save. To get out of here, again, I'm going to go to the bottom right, click menu. Now I have vitals. When I click on vitals, I have my intakes and my outputs. Notice that my intake has a red border around it. So if I click on that, it's red right now because I'm in my window where I need to document my lunch. So your breakfast, your lunch, and your dinner all have a very specific window or a time frame where you need to document those. If you don't document those within the time frame that we have given you, then they will show up as missed or that you did not document on them. So the nurses are going to run their compliance report at the end of the shift, and it's going to show them every single thing that you did not do for your shift. All right, so if I wait until lunch is no longer red and it's outside of its window, let's say that's at 2 p.m. and I wait until 2:30 to document on that, well, then it's going to show up on the report that I did not do it because I did not answer the question while it was red. So that problem has been happening quite often across some buildings. We get a lot of phone calls and emails about that. So just make sure you are answering your intakes, your lunch, your breakfast, your dinner in the time frame that you've been given. So to do that, I'm just going to click on lunch. So right here, it's going to timestamp it, my date and my time that they were taken. Not taken is a question up here. Notice it's not red, so I'm going to bypass that. And I'm going to go down to the red question, which is amount. By clicking on amount, I'm given a list of percentages. So my first option would be none. If the resident refused this lunch, I have to come in here and select none. Okay, that lets us know that we offered it and the resident refused it. As far as the percentages go, we just want to focus on the last number. So 25%, 50%, 75%, or 100%. The other option would be if the resident was NPO. Per our policy, if the resident eats less than 75% of their meal, we need to offer them a meal replacement. So let's do that. Let's say that our resident ate 50% of their meal and they took 240 mLs. So the first thing I'm going to do is talk about my meal. So I would say 50%. I'll come down, save it. It wants to know my fluids. So right here I have my volume and my route that I need to answer. Volume, 240 mLs. Enter. And what was the route? As a CNA, the only option that you are going to pick is oral. Enteral and parenteral, those would be done by the nursing staff. So I would say oral. Come down to the bottom and save it. Now, nothing's going to trigger me telling me to document the meal replacement. This is just something that we need to know and we need to practice. If the resident eats less than 75%, we need to offer a meal replacement. To document about the meal replacement, we're going to go to this option right here, which is supplements. I would select supplements. Again, it has my date and my time. And on this one, it has amount or volume. Now, this one is an exception to the rule. This is an either or. We do not need to answer both amount and volume. All right, so this program is built that some companies use these supplements as a way to document their 2-cal, their Ensure. We do not do it this way. We document all of our supplements as far as dietary goes on the MAR, and the nurses will take care of that. So for you, all we have to do is talk about the amount. So I click on amount, and I have the same exact thing here. So they ate 50% of their first meal. We gave them a meal replacement, and they ate 100% of that. Now, if we offered that meal replacement and they refused it, again, we need to come in here and select supplements, and then we'll pick none. That lets us know that we offered it, they refused it. Don't just leave it blank and not answer it, because then we don't know. It's just a hole, and we need to then dig deeper and figure out what's going on. So the resident ate 100% of their meal replacement. Come down and click Save. And now I have answered my lunch question with my fluids and my meal replacement. It works the exact same way for breakfast and for dinner. So when they are in their window, they will light up red. To go backwards, I'm going to click back, and I have my output. So it's talking about urine and my BM. So on urine, if you notice, there's quite a few questions here. Again, time-stamped. The first red question says amount and volume. This is just like the supplements. So we only want one of these two answered. We don't need to talk about the mLs of the urine output unless our resident is on a strict I&O, if they have an ostomy or a catheter, and we can measure the actual mLs of their urine output. Otherwise, we would just select an amount. Now, amount, this might not make a lot of sense for urine, large, medium, small, and none. But again, we are more concerned about the fact that it happened. These amounts right here could be subjective. What is a medium amount to me might not be a medium amount to you, but use your best judgment when answering this question. So if I were to say it was a medium amount, I would click medium. Again, on the amount, if the resident had no urine output during my shift, then towards the end of my shift, I would document none. It wouldn't make any sense to say none at the very beginning of my shift or within the first 2 hours of my shift, and then the resident has a urine output, 30 minutes later. Well, then my answer doesn't make that much sense. So if they truly had no urine output, wait till towards the end of your shift, then answer that question. Below that, we have other questions that are not red, but these do not need to be answered. So all we are looking for is the amount. I'll click Save. Same with my BM. It wants to know size of the volume. So again, size, let's say it was medium. I do not need to answer the volume because that's going to ask about mLs. And I would click Save. Come down here to the bottom and click back. If I go to my menu, my resident now, all red questions have been answered. So everything that was required for my shift to be answered at least once has been answered. If I go and look at my residents, which I could come up here to the top and just click Switch Resident, notice that Mr. Muterspall no longer has a red border around his name. Again, I have to emphasize that this does not mean we are done charting about Nate Muterspall. If something else occurs during the shift, we need to go in there, we need to talk about it again. But to show you something pretty cool that will come in handy, if we're looking at the vitals and we're talking about intakes, and we're entering all the lunches that our entire unit, every resident on our unit just had lunch and we need to talk about it. So I was in my lunch, I talked about it, okay? The cool part is I can go to Switch Resident up here at the top, and I could pick, let's say, Mr. Crickmore, and it would take me directly to his lunch and fluids. So at this point, I'd be able to say lunch, the amount, he ate 100%, and he had 360 mLs. The route was oral. Save it. I could then switch resident, go to Mr. Jason Walton, talk about his lunch. So Mr. Walton ate 100%. Fluids, 240. Route was oral. Save it. And I could keep going. So that function right up there, the switch resident, comes in real handy, especially when we're talking about inputting their meal intakes. It allows you to jump from one to the next very quickly and talk about the same thing, and it takes you to the same page every single time. That has been Point of Care. Thank you for your time, and have a great day.